Welcome. In this video we're going to explore using Gamemaker to do basic modification to sprites and to import sprite strips as animated sprites. So I'm going to be making use of some files in this art stuff folder. If you download it from the website and unzip the package, you'll find these images. And so I'm going to be using some of them to do stuff, and you can download them to try these things out yourself. So if I bring an image into Gamemaker, so kind of multiple ways I can do it. I can go make a sprite first and then load it from the file. You can also just drag in a file, and you'll be asked whether you want to bring it as a sprite or a background. So I'm going to go ahead and bring it in as a sprite. To work with a sprite, to modify what it looks like, I need to edit the file. And when I hit edit the first time, I'm looking at all the frames. And normally if I want to actually modify this picture, and there's just one frame here, one sub-image, I need to go in again to get to the image editor. And then once I've done that, I maybe zoom in, and I can start drawing or erasing things, just like you would in some other paint program. You can do basic modifications in Gamemaker just fine. You probably don't want to try and do serious artwork in here. If you really want to get fancy with your art, you need to get either Photoshop or the freely available GIMP, something more powerful, and learn that tool. But for basic modifications, just fine. One thing to watch out for is most of the tools are affected by this opacity slider. And so what opacity does, I'm going to be drawing with my pencil and just drawing a black line. If opacity is set to halfway, so fully opaque means fully solid, not at all see-through, that's 255. If I'm halfway opaque, so somewhere about 128-ish, right, now I'm painting that black and it's partially transparent. And the less opaque it is, the less dark it'll look. And if the opacity is set all the way to 0, it basically does nothing. So if you're ever trying to use a tool and not seeing anything at all, go make sure the opacity slider is set to something above 0. I'm not going to save that. Also built into Gamemaker are some handy tools for doing basic modifications. So let's say I want to have this character automatically rotate or disappear from the screen. I can choose one of these animations, so I'm going to have him disappear over the course of 10 frames, and it's going to automatically create a sequence that has that happen. To change how fast the preview plays, you can change the speed here. If you change the speed here, that indicates that you're going to have to change the speed the sprite plays at in when you display it. This doesn't really affect anything. It's just for preview purposes. So know that this speed is only used right here and not when the sprite's displayed in the game. But so I could have that applied. I could also say have him fade to black as he's doing this over 10 frames. And so now he's also kind of fading out to pure black over the course of that. Anything that you do when you're looking in this view, so let's say I decide I don't like Zoidberg's color, and I'm going to go to the colorize, and I'm going to do this, and let's do shift the hue, and so it just changes kind of all the colors, slides them through the color spectrum. If I do that here, it applies to every frame. Undo that. If I go into one particular frame and do that same transformation, so we'll colorize, it's only going to apply to that frame. So basically, if you only want to modify one frame, make sure you're going in and working with that frame. You can use the arrows to then cycle between frames. If you want to do something to every frame, every sub-image, make sure you're doing it out here. So the other thing I want to look at is bringing in an animated sprite strip. If you find an image for an animated character, what you're probably going to find is something like one of these. So if I open up this image, we see just a bunch of different frames for the character. And if I try and bring this into Gamemaker, it's probably not going to be what I want. So I'm going to do that here in this sprite 0. We're going to load that sprite, and that's not what I want to see. So the way to do this correctly is to actually go to the Edit Sprite, and if I want to bring in kind of multiple frames of this as an animation, I need to say Create from Strip. And then I can pick which image, and I'm not going to make it opaque or remove the background or anything else. I'm just going to bring in this image. And then I can define this box, and this box will be the image I bring in. So if I want to bring in that frame, I get it, go figure out where that location needs to be. The other thing I can do is say that I want to bring in 4 frames. And so now I've got 4 boxes that are going to be kind of cut out and turned into individual subframes, subimages in Gamemaker. And I could say, well, I want to have 4 images per row, and now I've got 4 boxes in a row. Then I've got to go find the right place, and this is kind of finicky, so I'm actually going to turn on the screen magnifier to help me out with doing this. And so we'll come down here, and we'll go ahead and try and get lined up on this first image. And so first I've got to figure out the size I want, and from doing this earlier, I think 31 by 31 works well. And you can see right there where it turns green, that's showing me kind of the opposite of pink. It's showing me that's right on the edge of what's being cut, and I'm not getting those gray boxes around this character, so that looks good. And then for my 4 frames to get them spaced right, I have to figure out how much separation there is. So this is kind of trial and error again, and I've played around with it and figured out 6 pixels of separation between each box. Looks just about right. So once I get that all figured out, then I can hit OK and suck in my 4 frames. And I can play with the speed to control the speed it plays these frames. It's important to note that this speed affects nothing in the game. It only affects kind of this preview mode. But it allows you to just kind of experiment with different speeds of playing this animation, see if it's going to look okay. And that looks pretty good. So at this point, I can worry about going in and, say, removing the background color. So I'm going to erase color and make sure I pick the black, and boom, now I've got a character who would sit well on any kind of background. So if I put him on top of like a blue background color, he's not going to have a big black box around him. And that's what I want to see. Now, if there was a bunch of black inside the image and it pulled that out too, that might be bad. So in that case, you might actually have to rely on if you have issues like that, then you might want to try the remove background feature when you pull the image in. So we're pretty lucky if we get something like this, where the individual frames are nice and lined up like they are in that fish image. That's the best case scenario. The less good scenario is something like this. Let me go ahead and create a sprite, and on this one I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. So edit the sprite and then create from strip, and I'm going to go grab this Ken image. And I'm going to do the same trick. I'm not going to remove the pink for now. I'm going to leave that in there because I can pull it out later. So here's Ken from Street Fighter. And I want to pull in an image of him throwing his fireball. And you can see here's kind of the first frame. Here's later on. It's actually a pretty long sequence. I'm not going to do it all. But the sequence of kind of going from the initial start of the motion all the way through to finished and back to his standard pose. Now, let's just start with one image. and it's nowhere near big enough. So once again, we've got to go play with the size. Let's try just 64, 100, maybe a little bit more. So something roughly like that. Seems to fit this frame. But quickly, as I say, okay, I want to get, let's just get 3 frames, it's pretty clear that I'm not going to be able to make this work easily like I could with a fish. First of all, the box that fit this guy doesn't even come close to fitting this guy, and definitely won't fit this guy. And they're not spaced in an even grid, so I'm basically not going to be able to grab them all at once. So instead, what I need to do is just start with one frame. And I probably want to start with a big one. So something like this frame right here. And I'm going to go ahead and just make sure I fit that one. That's a little overkill. Okay, that seems to fit the biggest frame I've got to worry about. And I'm only going to grab one frame. And I'm going to hit OK. And I'm going to remember that the vertical offset was 1391. Now this one frame, what I can do is then I can go and add from strip and choose Ken again and try and use the same settings, and I'm actually not going to use the mouse here. I'm just going to change the horizontal offset to go grab like the frame before this one. And what I want to kind of do is figure out an anchor point. So this foot is basically what he's pushing off of, so I'm going to try and get that foot to always match up in each frame. So let's start with 200, 210, 220. So I don't know, I'm going to go with 221, and I'll go from there. I'm probably going to have to fix this up later. So I'll grab that frame and rearrange the order. Now it's got part of the next thing. I'm actually relatively happy with his foot placement. This is what I like to see, is that foot's not moving around a whole lot. I'm going to crank the speed way down. All right, so it almost does look like his foot's planted. If a frame is out of place, you can open up that one frame into a shift to move it a little bit. And if I've got extra junk, well, I can get rid of that pretty easy. I can erase this stuff by using the eyedropper tool to copy that pink, and then just wipe out the stuff that I didn't need from that frame. We'll do one more frame like this. So we're going to add from strip, grab Ken again, and this time I'll go, actually I'll go back one more frame here. Let's go 140, maybe a little bit more, 146. All right, I'm going to go with 147. And so this one, once again, actually should be back at the beginning. Now this time I'm a little less happy. It looks like his foot slides a little bit over. So like this one, I might come in and do a shift and say I want to shift it 2 pixels to the left, and go ahead and to wrap things around, and then do the same trick to erase the stuff I don't care about. And that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that animation. And so at this point, then I could worry about going and once again erasing the background color and have a animated image that's ready to go in my game.